Hello, Culture Matters podcast. I'm so excited to introduce you to our guest today. Before I do that, here's a quote I picked just for this episode. Discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Jim Rohn, our guest today, a friend of the Culture Matters podcast, I believe represents that quote very well. Has a long tenure in business, having started on the trading floor, background in econ, uh, started their own business and very successful at that. Helped a company in the construction space go from 75 million to over 600 million in their tenure. Worked with the Moody's Family Trust, some big brands, like JP Morgan, but most importantly, if you listen to the Culture Matters podcast and you love our guests and our regular guests, our director of growth and strategy at the one and only Pavement Group, Brian Ferris, a good friend of mine, is joining us today on the Culture Matters podcast, and I can't wait to learn what it takes around leadership, discipline. This is a former power lifter, bodybuilder on the Culture Matters podcast today. I'm excited about that as well. Hey, Brian, thanks for coming on the show.
Jay, thanks for having me. Excited about this.
We were talking before we hit record, and it made me think of, it was interesting, the coincidence, some of the conversation around discipline and reality versus expectation.
hmm
Were you what's your take on discipline and its role in having a successful team building towards goals as it relates to business, based on your background in business and your experiences helping companies grow?
I think the word discipline is, I think, ping ponged around a lot, whether it's in somebody's personal life or in their business life. But I think in reality, discipline is what happens when nobody's looking. What do you do every day? You and I have had long conversations about my daily regiment, or the regiment of people that are on our team at TPG right now. And as we continue to grow, it's discipline to me is um, what's happening when nobody's looking.
Mm,
Do you
wow.
do those things when nobody's looking?
What the driving force between doing the things that suit our goals, that suit our
Mhm.
visions. What do you think? What would you say the driving force to discipline when no one's looking? Is it core values? Is it um the people to our left, to our right, above, below? Where's that driving force coming from in your view?
I think it comes from a couple of things. I think it comes from your core values. That's certainly a big part of it. But I think a lot of it comes to, like where's your focus? What is important to you? You know, my discipline comes from my family, right? My wife and my children. My discipline is driven by them to be able to make sure that I'm the best version of me, both professionally, as a husband, as a father at home. Um, so a lot of my discipline has become because I have an amazing wife and I have amazing children. And if
Mm,
I don't set the discipline and I don't set my schedule and my life and how I'm going to approach things, then I'm going to let them down. And discipline ensures that I don't ever let them down.
wow. Were early on in your career, do you remember any significant figures that stood out that represented discipline, some of the stronger qualities of leadership that you'd say that you admire today than you see in leaders today that you want to embody yourself?
Yeah, I mean, my mentor in my professional life was a gentleman that I met. His name is Ken DiFrancesco. I've worked for him three different times in life, and as I'm in my mid 50s now, but as a young 20-year-old coming out of college, um, I didn't have that same discipline, and tripped and stubbed my toe many times. And he was always there to somehow catch me, figure it out, teach me. Um, I'm a 4 a.m. guy every day. I've talked about that a lot.
Wow.
Um, that wasn't because I wanted to be, right? I mean, when you're in your mid 20s, that was something that was taught to me. You know, get your day set, get your day going. 4 o'clock is just the time that works for me, right, in my lifestyle. Um, but he was always one that, man, I stubbed my toe. I worked for him 3 different times in my life. And every time I stubbed my toe, it was never negative. He was always there to catch me and say, "All right, what are we trying to accomplish? What's your
Mm.
desired goal?" And I think all those things through the years um, formed the discipline that I have today. And I've been in the workforce 30 plus years, but it's probably been a good 20 that this has been my lifestyle every day, even on a Saturday or a Sunday.
How do you maximize or yeah, maximize, get the most out of that 4 a.m. wake up? So whether our listeners they start at 5 or they start at 6 or they start at 4, they start at 3, what rituals work for you to put you in a proactive state to be to build your success?
You know, um, as you know, we work long days. But 4 a.m. for me is I read. I can read a book. I can read an article about the market. I that 1 hour from 4 to 5 o'clock is my time. Nobody calls me between 4 and 5 a.m. Um, it gives me an opportunity to get my mind right for the day. From 5 to 6, I respond to emails, look at reports for the day, set my agenda on what I want to tackle that day, and then shower, shave, and go
Wow.
to work. I have
Wow.
an executable plan before I get to the office.
You have an executable plan before you get to the office.
Yes.
How does that make a difference?
I think it allows me to maximize my time. Um, I have about an hour commute to the office every day. But I have an executable plan that I want to share with our team, things that I'm looking at, things that we can apply to our team to be successful moving forward for that day. And in our business, things change on the fly every minute, right? But if you're not prepared, you can get lost in the quicksand very quickly.
What's your take on proactivity versus reactivity?
Well, I think as a leader, you have to be prepared to always react. And you can't prepare like it's going to be this topic or this topic, but if you're intimately knowledgeable about your business and your team and your staff, it allows you to react. I come in with a prepared plan, and I share this with Brian and Michael often. Um, my favorite thing about TPG is it's not what are you going to do, it's where do you start every day. But I have an executable plan of things that I want to accomplish that day, knowing that I'm gonna get deviated at some point. And that's perfectly fine. But it allows me to get back on track. If I didn't have a plan, when you get, if you're setting your plan when you get to work that day, um, you're behind the 8 ball.
What advice do you have for listeners that want to think in terms of a plan? They're thinking, oh my, this sounds like could be a breakthrough for me. Listen, I don't have one when I go into work, or I don't have one when I start the day. Where would one start that's never even thought this thought before?
When I was really young, my last 30 minutes of every day was writing a list down of things that I wanted to accomplish the next day. But me personally, as I got to know myself, because I don't think in your early 20s or even late 20s you really know who you are yet. And so I would end up writing my plan out at the end of the day, and my mind wanders,
Mm.
and I'm not suggesting that anybody be like I am, but I dream about work. Or maybe sometimes it could be nightmares, but I have dreams about work. And so what I've found is that for me at the end of the day isn't the right time. I end up missing things. For me, as I have dinner with my family, and I'm trying to be, as my son always tells me, and he wrote this on my grease board in my office, be where your feet are.
Mm.
Right. And I think you've seen that in my office. I try very hard to do that. I'm not great at it. Like I'll physically be there at dinner, but my mind is many times other places. Um, but what I've found is that at the end of the day, my hour drive home gives me some time to reflect on the day, think about things that I want to accomplish tomorrow. Um, but sometimes laying in bed at night, I have a notebook next to my bed. I write some stuff down. But that 4 o'clock in the morning, when I get up to read, and then from 5 to 6, that's my time. I have 2 hours there. I can do whatever I want. And I just elect to read, and I elect to set my day for the or schedule for the day.
So in thinking in terms of setting a schedule for the day, are you suggesting as opposed to at night, making that list like you did in the past, in the morning, you're more clearly thinking,
I am.
boom, 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 boom.
Yep.
So is that 1 through 10, or is it A through Z, or how would you
I think
articulate that?
it, for me, it's a numbered system, but a lot of it is what does my team, what do we need to
Mm,
accomplish that day? You know, they're very, very rarely are they ever self-serving. It's looking at us as an organization, and the triumphs and challenges that we have as an organization, which every organization has. If somebody were to tell me it's lily white and perfect every day in their business, I would have a really hard time believing that. But you know, it's directionally moving the needle for our organization.
wow. Oh, going back to the reading piece,
Mhm.
have you always been a reader?
Since I'm going to tell you at 52, I love the fact that I'm a reader. When I was 8 or 9, I hated the fact that I was a reader.
Huh.
And I think I've shared this with you previously. My mom, as a single mom, forced my brother and I to read every day before we left the house or before we went out to play in the summer. And we
Wow.
we we were at that point. Remember, this is in the 70s and early 80s. We would read the newspaper, but she'd take the comics and the sports section away. Like you weren't reading about the Pirates or the Steelers or the Penguins or, you know, the comics. You were reading something legitimate in the newspaper. And it was 30
Wow.
minutes every morning.
30
And
minutes.
yep, 30 minutes. And that was when I was a young man, a young kid. But I think that set a tone for me to always want to be a reader. You and I've talked about this, and you say you kind of straddle the proverbial barbed wire fence between, listening to books and reading books. And, for me, I prefer to read the physical book, right? It's my way of getting lost for that
Yep.
time in whatever I'm reading. And it's a personal thing.
I think it's amazing. Yeah. W- Or so how you when you what have you learned about yourself from having that time to dedicated to reading?
I think it goes back to the word that started the day. It creates a discipline.
Mm,
And I read things that challenge me. I read things that force me to think about things differently. I'm not interested in reading books, and I think in the last couple of weeks I've sent you a couple of books that are
yep.
different. They're different mindset thoughts. Um, but I'm always trying to find ways to think differently. I know my way is not always the right way, or the things that I think. I'm trying to read things that teach me how to think differently and be a more effective leader.
What role do you think, or how do you see leadership and thinking differently interplay?
That's a great question. Um, Start with leadership. Leadership is not telling people what to do. It is not. I mean, I've had bosses and executives that have led me previously that they believe that leadership is telling people what to do. For me, leadership is showing, educating, and teaching people how to think most effectively for your business. And if you can do those things, then you can cross the line and it's more effective with your family. Very similar to a story that you and I were chatting about kind of prior to this call was, I have three children and they're wonderful people. But the way I have to lead them as a father is very different, right? My son, I can be very direct and in his face. My daughter, I can say the same thing. I just have to say it differently, right? And so much of being a leader is how you say what you say.
Hmm.
And as being a relatively new employee at the Pavement Group, you know, I have a lot of opinions, right? But for me just to share my opinions every day isn't going to make us the most effective team. Yeah, I'm the new guy on the block, right? I've been there 9, 10 months. I need to come in and I need to learn about every single individual in our office and learn how to lead them, learn how to help them. And I think that's the big dynamic as you mature and you evolve as a leader is it isn't it isn't dictatorial. It's educational. It's value based and learning about people.
What did you learn in in finance that may have been very valuable moving into the construction industry when you did?
Um, I think the in finance and the boardrooms and meeting with large banks or large financial institutions, the the rhetoric and the dialect and the things that are used in those environments have very much been different than what has been in the construction business. When I first got into the construction business about 12 years ago, it was a lot of yelling and screaming and threatening. And I mean, it's a different environment. And I don't think everybody is motivated by that methodology, right? Sometimes it just means taking a walk with a guy and having a conversation, you know. Um, so I've tried to kind of, as I've moved into this space and, whether you're self-performing or, you're set up as an organization like TPG or whatever your structure is really understanding your environment and your people and then effectively communicating in that situation. I'm not a big yeller and screamer. I'm not motivated by that, right? Like that's not what gets me. Um, and I think in the construction space, especially as you get generational, you start looking at this younger group that's coming in, that's building the infrastructure of our country. They're not used to that, right? This isn't 1975 anymore, right? They want to have a conversation, and so trying to really be respectful of our partners. You and I, that's a word that I use regularly with you. Um, I don't speak to our partners that way. I listen to them. I remember God gave me two ears and one mouth and use them appropriately.
When you say partners, who are you for our audience that may not understand the relationship?
Yeah.
Who are you talking about, and what's your philosophy behind that
So
idea
our
of partner?
partners, I use that word and I don't use it loosely, but I use it often. Our partners are anybody that is outside of TPG. I mean, those are our partners. Those are the people that matter the most to me. I can only be as successful as they are. And I've started a weekly call with a group of partners. It's been unbelievably rewarding for me and for our organization. But I also believe and I know that it has been unbelievably rewarding for them. Um, we originally were going to do this bi-monthly, and after our first call, they
Hmm.
asked for a weekly call. They're giving up an hour of their life every week to dive into top topics and subject matter that again are not self-serving. Um, as I've laid out the structure of this call, it is 80% them, 20% us. Like I don't want to control the conversation. I want to know what my partners need. And if they're successful, we'll be successful.
Mm.
So it took I just changed the way the cadence is going to be. Nothing earth-shattering. But my mom used to tell me all the time, like, God gave you two ears and one mouth and use them appropriately.
Mm.
And I didn't realize that. I probably didn't, I heard it, but I didn't understand it until I got older. Until I got a little bit older.
What has to happen for us to be ready to understand a lesson like that? I
Experience,
relate to that. Yeah.
experience. I mean, I, you know, my whole life leading up to, getting in the construction business was being in the front of the room talking, and I wasn't a great listener. And as I reflect back on my life, I probably now realize how much I missed,
Mm.
right? I was there. I can tell you about it, but did I really understand it? And I don't think I did. It was a lot of stubbing my toe through the years and learning tough lessons. Not losing deals but I could have been better had I listened more.
What are some of the core values that you'd say you've observed in the most successful cultures that you've been around in your tenure? Clients of companies you worked with, companies you've worked with, companies you started.
Um, so I mean we could work from kind of TPG backwards or we can start at the beginning, but I think um at TPG, selflessness is the value, and it's one of our core values that I think is unique. Our leadership, specifically um, Brian and Michael, who sit in the C-suite, are unique leaders. Very different people, very different people. Um, but their absolute commitment to selflessness has changed TPG. It has allowed us to grow at the pace that we're growing. I've been around terrible core values in my life as well, where and I would even argue that at one point, um, my core values when I started my own company were not very good. Um, I think that I started a company as a consulting firm, and it grew very quickly for me, and I never really established core values. I think I was too immature. Um, I just didn't understand yet, and it hurt me. It hurt me in the growth of our business. It hurt me in the management of the employees that I had because I was focused on the wrong thing as a leader. I was focused on driving revenue, money all the time, and not focusing on the right things. Um, honesty and integrity are obviously ones that are thrown around. As you know, every firm seems to have those two core values. Um, I would say don't say it, live it. Like Society Generale and JP and the Moody Family Trust, like those places had high integrity all the time,
Wow.
like all the time. And you go back to like when I first got into the business with, Nat City and the trading floor, there's no integrity. None. It's the biggest, loudest voice works. Now the way the floor is, it's very different than it was in 1995.
But what is integrity?
What do people want it to mean, or what does it really mean?
Yeah, the latter. Like, what does it really mean, right? How do we unpack it, kind of break it apart a little bit? I think that could be very helpful, valuable.
I think Jay, and I'm going to
I,
focus in on us a little bit here at
I,
TPG.
I do want to share something though. I think I learned from you. Just like on that audio physical book. I think disciplining the physical book, the physical reading, build
Mhm.
it constitutes integrity. There's an integration going on. The listening is a different experience. It's like sponge. It's like extra. That's something I learned from our conversations. Physically reading, Bill, because this show is about reading. A lot of it. We believe that when people read to think, write to develop, listen to hear what is unsaid, speak to get let go. It's about speaking and listening and learning culture. So I want to acknowledge you for that. The daily habit to read every day is an integrity building activity, I think.
That's for me, right? Like that reading, that first hour of my day, that is the integrity of what I believe for me. Integrity in our business, and it's a lot about what we do with our advisory board, is very much driven on that core principle, that core value of integrity. I need to help lead our organization to be as successful as we can possibly be. But I also need to be mindful and have the proper integrity in place to make sure that my partners are also successful. And I think in the construction space now, so many times we look at a transaction versus a client, a customer versus a client. And a customer is very transaction oriented. But I think if you apply the proper integrity, if you're doing what's right for your customer every day of the week, and you're doing what's right for your partner every day of the week, then you will do all right for yourself as well.
Hmm.
And so those are things that we talk about internally, as I review opportunities and things that come through our office. I mean, that is my core value.
What would you say subcontractors need to be
Partners need
successful?
partners. I hate that
Yes,
word.
yes,
I
yes.
hate that word
Yeah,
subcontractor.
yeah, that was an easy tee up.
That was a layup for me,
Yeah,
but
there was yeah, it's like, oh, we're but yes, please, partners, what do they need in your estimation to be successful?
it's quality in, quality out with them. We don't self-perform at TPG, right? So we don't have iron on the streets. So the quality of information that we provide and that we gather from our clients to provide to them matters. And the better job that we do at that, the better and more successful we are going to be. A big theme that I established in January at TPG was buying better. It's margin control, not margin manipulation. Those are two very different things. And margin control I think when I first introduced this, they thought that it meant we have to take more from our contractors. And that's not what buying better is. Buying better is us being better organizationally to give our information to our partners, and therefore they're able to give us better costing. And if we do that properly, then we'll win. If we don't, then we'll lose.
What difference would you say some of the differences that um like the outcomes, the value clients receive from um getting great work, getting quality work done? Like, right, the what's the value of a client working with the Pavement Group, working with its partners, right?
So
As
I think it comes in a lot of different avenues. It's a great question because every client's buying habits are different, right? So some of them are budget driven. Some of them are, looking at a long-term hold strategy. Some of them are looking at flipping a property. So I think first and foremost, we do a really good job of finding out what their desired outcomes are on the front end. Then being able to value engineer based on a budget and really investing the time on the front end. One of the things that our partners um, frustrate. One of the things that frustrates our partners is when they're not getting all the valuable information up front, and we've got 3 or 4 or 5 revisions, and there's hard dollar costs involved in everything, right? But there's also incurred costs, right? So if I'm calling Jay Duran and I'm saying, hey, I've got this really good opportunity in Naples. I need you to go look at this property, and that's all I give you. Then what you're going to give me back is may not be appropriate for what our client's looking for. And now, if you've got to touch it 3 or 4 times, there's a cost. You have an incurred cost in your business. It hasn't touched me yet, but it will when your bid comes through to me.
powerful. What advice do you have on our listeners of how to go deeper in dialogue with their whoever their customers are? So asking questions, due diligence, discovery, get having the heavy lift in the front of the front, not the back, or towards the middle or the end.
Right.
What advice do you have that advisor?
Don't be excited just to have an opportunity. um in our industry and in our business, and it's not unique to TPG, or I think it's across the board and in other places that I've worked. Don't be just excited to have the opportunity. Slow down. Gather as much information as possible. Not everybody's going to give you a budget. It just doesn't work like that. Some folks need full assessments. Some folks are looking for budgets for another year. So they're asking us to provide a really detailed, comprehensive report on what we're trying to accomplish or what they need to accomplish on their property. But slow down and ask more questions.
Hmm.
Don't think about the opportunity as a sale before you've gotten to the facts. A lot of times I think in the construction space or the GC space, it's you get a name, an address, and a set of blueprints, and now you're all excited, but you really don't know what they're trying to accomplish. Let's find out what they're really trying to accomplish. And I think you become infinitely more um, successful in that client relationship if you do those things. Otherwise, you're just another bidder. And that's not really our model. That's not what we're trying to accomplish. We don't need practice bidding. We need practice winning.
Mm.
And I use that with our team at TPG all the time.
What's your take on focus?
Uh, my take or the take that I try to apply to people,
Well, now I'm fascinated.
because those are two very different things.
Like, what is focus? What does it look like? How do we touch it, grab it, feel it? What is it not?
So, for me, it goes back to the quote that you've read on my grease board: "Be where your feet are." When I am with you, I'm 100% with you. I'm not looking out my glass window in my office. I'm not taking phone calls. I was made sure to, I'm here. This is where I'm focused. And I think so many times in corporate America, you're on a Zoom call, right? I mean, this happened 4 or 5 years ago that Zoom or Teams became a real thing, but everybody's got two or three monitors in their office, right? I've got three in my office at home.
Hmm.
My focus is here. I think so many times, and I see it in our office. Folks are on a Zoom call with Jay or Susie or Bobby or whoever, but they're also reading an email off to each side, or they're checking their text messages. Then you're not focused. You can't hear 100% of what Jay Duran is telling me right now if you're looking at other things. You just can't. And so focus is being in the moment that you're at and giving 100% of that time and energy to that individual you're on the phone with. That's focus.
What advice do you have for our listeners that want to be as prepared as possible or more prepared than they normally are for for whatever goals that they're working on, whatever goals that they have?
Um, think I'm a big thinker. So me personally, and even preparation for this, and um, I try to ask questions that I already know the answer to. Right? I'm trying to, I sent you a bunch of texts before today, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Um, and out of respect for you, or if I'm talking to a client out of respect for them, um, I try never to go conference call, conference call, back to back to back. I prepare that morning before, as we talked about, for my calls for the day. But I try to take 10 to 15 minutes before every call to make sure I'm 100% dialed in. If you were to go and look inside my notebook, um, it has every call lined up, questions that I feel like I need answers to. Um, Now, a lot of those questions come up during the call, and I'm writing other additional things down, but um, trying to make sure that the conversation is guiding towards what are we really trying to accomplish? Like, I ask our folks in the office all the time, what's your desired outcome? Like, what is our desired outcome of this call? I think Brian, I can't remember if it was Brian or Mike said, like, somebody asks for a meeting, make sure that there's a purpose for the meeting. Like, what is our desired outcome? What are we trying to achieve? And if you don't define that, then I'm probably not going to join your call. If you say, hey, I want to accomplish this, then I'll be prepared for that. And we can deviate, right? That happens. Um, but a lot of it is just I try to take that 10 or 15 minutes before to dial in my notes that I worked on at 4 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the morning.
Oh, so allocating time prior to think, hey,
Yep.
and what questions am I asking? What's my goal here? And then
To
do
be
you take
engaged.
time what do you mean?
Being engaged. One of Ken DiFrancesco I referenced earlier. He had a great rule. If a meeting in the boardroom or a conference call was to happen at 8 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning and you were late, you were locked out. It wasn't important to you. Now, I've never adopted that, but it always resonated with me in the fact that I need to be present and prepared for whatever meeting that I'm going into, right? He would lock the conference room door. You weren't allowed in.
Mm.
And then it was your responsibility on your time to go figure that out. I never adopted that, but it did resonate with me that be prepared and be on time and
Did
be
you ever ask him
yeah.
what the philosophy behind that was?
He always said to me, he's like, if it isn't that important to you, then it isn't that important for me to have you here.
Powerful.
And if you've ever read anything about Elon Musk, who I've read a lot, um, he he throws people out of meetings. If you have nothing to add, leave, get out. Like we're zero focused on whatever we're trying to accomplish.
It's just I'm curious if your thought on this. The cohesion is so important. If we were a tribe, a warring tribe, it comes down to life or death. Everyone that's there, do they have their weapons? Do they know how to use them?
Yep.
Uh, Battle could be around the corner. So you want to be on the same
You got your gun,
page,
but you got no ammunition.
or some if yeah, it's interesting, very powerful case study or example of the doors locked because someone's going to learn how to reorient themselves on an individual basis,
Yep.
or they're not. But at least there, what the order leads to execution. Disorder can lead to failure, or us another tribe coming in and taking us out.
Yep. Well, I mean, think about it from this perspective. If I set up a meeting, right, and I call you and I call three or four other people, and we have a meeting set up for 8 a.m. and I show up to that meeting at 8:10, how important is that meeting to me? Right off the bat, the people in the room that I've invited to be there because I value their opinion, right? I took the time to invite them. I set an agenda, but now I'm 10 minutes late. How important is that to me? Right? Or if my boss, Brian Hess, Mike Hugin, if they say, hey, we've got a meeting at 8 o'clock in the morning and I show up at 8:10, just the perception of it is I don't really think that much of it. Right? Should have I if Mike sets a meeting with me or Brian sets a meeting with me and says, we're going to meet and there's no agenda, and I write back, hey, what is the focus for today's meeting? Now they understand that I'm thinking about it. I'm going to show up prepared. I don't want to wing it. I want to be prepared.
You're touching on something that's really, I think. So with the show, for example, I've always prepared before each episode.
Hmm.
As the show has grown and I've matured and evolved with it,
Hmm.
and the what I've noticed, the guests that have in status, globally and so on, the expectation analogous to when you were texting me, hey, what can I do to be ready? That idea of the guest, the more, the more integrated they are, the more they're like, all right, hey, are you even going to send questions so I can prepare? I got that from somebody. And then it made me think, okay, if I have really prepared, which I always have, the next level for me would be to send them, hey, here are some of the themes that we're going to go into.
Which you
Here's
did
some
with me this
questions.
morning.
This is something that I've had to learn from a thousand reps, that it actually honors the guest to give them a framework or something so that they can do the very best they can to be ready and prepare. I'm sharing my preparation with the guest when I share with them the themes or the topics or the questions. And in the beginning, when I first started, it was a genuine. I was coming from what I believe is an authentic place. Like, oh, I don't want it to be canned,
Right.
but that's not. If you've done the preparation and you're really present and listening, it isn't canned. It's exploratory. The order, that it's like the rules create. It's like, chess. There's an infinite amount of moves, but it does
Right.
have rules. So I haven't quite thought of it in these terms until right now. That I'm sharing if I prepared, I'm sharing my preparation with the guest by giving them, hey, here are the themes, here are the topics, even some questions I'm interested. Like I may make that a a component of the show as it evolves.
Sure.
Because I've noticed the most impressive, quite frankly, and esteemed guests are often always, you know, what are we talking about? How can I be of value? Hey, can you send me questions? I'll prepare. I had a mentor say that. Give me the questions so I could prepare. I don't want to, they wanted to do the best job possible. So I love the conversation. That's very helpful for me. What are your thoughts? You're
Well, and
percolating
it's
in there.
interesting. Like, you and I have we've had, I think this is our third formal meeting in the last 2 or 3 weeks, and I was blessed to have you in the office last week, and we had some sidebars, right? Just one-off conversations, which are, I think, are unbelievably healthy. But in preparation for this or for the other calls that we've had, I always want to be the best version of me. I don't ever want to have a conversation with our team or anybody in our business that I'm not prepared for, right? It makes it feel like it's disingenuous, right? Like, all right, I'm going to take this phone call because I feel like I have to, or are you just going to be the best version of you all the time? And listen, I'm not. I mean, I am far from the best version of myself every single day and every single conversation. Um, some of it is my ADHD where like my mind just goes a million places, or I'm bouncing off walls, or it's squirrels running on a tree and I just saw that out of the corner of my eye and my head snaps around. And but I'm conscious of it to try to be the best version of myself all the time. Most importantly, with my family,
Hmm.
which I've failed at a million times. Go on vacation, but you work in the room till 2 o'clock and they're on the beach, right? And I'm not advocating that you're going to be perfect all the time, right?
Hmm.
That's just not going to happen. But I'm conscious about trying to be the best version of myself in every situation.
As we close, that's a great part too. Just for our listeners that are thinking, all right, I have not been as disciplined as I would have liked to be, or I think I should in the season that I'm in. The bridge between my expectations of success and reality just quite isn't there. How do our listeners reset? What advice would you have for them? They could look, the year's not over. There's plenty of there's months left. What advice do you have on a reset? How to reframe, reset, end the year strong for our listeners that want to have an amazing 2026 and do the best they can for 2025.
As elementary as this is going to sound, Jay, you were a bodybuilder. I was a power lifter for years. And we've had all these instances where we've walked away from the gym, or we've walked away from our discipline on our diets or whatever it may be. Take the next 2 or 3 weeks and force feed yourself a regimented time block schedule to get focused. And then it becomes a habit, and then it becomes habitual. Um, this has taken me 30 years to get to, right? This didn't happen overnight. But I mean, you and I have both spent more hours in the gym than we probably ever wanted to. And when we walk away, that first 2 to 3 weeks are the hardest weeks to get back because it's changing habits. Um, but I would tell everybody, do a genuine reflection of yourself on where you want to get better. And I'm open for suggestions on how I can get better every day. Um, like I'm very, very disciplined from 4 in the morning until 5 or 6 o'clock at night. And then I lose a lot of that discipline in the evening, right? When I get home, I get into my comfort zone. My wife's home, my kids are running around, and I kind of lose that discipline sometimes. I need to be better at that, right?
Mm.
Um, but I would say time block, focus, and change those habits. And it's hard. It is hard. As I get older, there's things that I find that I could do in my 30s and 40s that I just I just don't want to do it. It isn't always easy to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning. Especially when I'm out running with my kids till 11 or 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, oh, or I'm at my son's hockey game and I get home at 2 o'clock in the morning and I got 2 hours of sleep, but I get up on Saturday morning at 4 o'clock. I may sneak a nap in the middle of the day, but because I'm old and I need it, right? But I value that time at 4 o'clock in the morning every day.
Brian Ferris, this has been an amazing conversation. I can't wait to re-listen to it. If people are listening, they want to connect with you, they're potential partners to the Pavement Group, those
Sure.
that want to get closer and understand how they can work with you and the company. What's the fastest way to reach you?
I'm old school. I like the telephone. Pick up the phone, give me a call at any time. I respond to emails. I'm that guy that has no emails in his inbox at the end of every day. But no, just reach out and I would love to have a conversation, whether it's for the value of TPG or it's just to talk through some of the things that I've had to do to become as disciplined as I am in my regimen, my routine.
If you're listening to this, please share this with a friend. Leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much for doing this,
Jay, thanks for having me, buddy. It's great seeing you again.
and we will see you next time.